If you had told me a year ago that my parents, the people who raised me, the ones who promised to support me, would be the ones to completely destroy my trust, I wouldn't have believed you. I grew up believing in family, in the idea that no matter how much we disagreed, my mom and dad would always have my back. But nothing prepares you for the moment you realize the people you loved most were willing to betray you for someone else. And in my case, that someone else was my sister, Grace. I should probably start by saying that I'm engaged. I've been with my fiancé, Mark, for almost 5 years. We met in college. He was the nerdy, quiet guy in my economics class who always carried an extra pen because he knew people like me would forget theirs. Somehow, that little detail grew into late-night study sessions, inside jokes, and eventually, the kind of love I never thought I'd find. When Mark proposed, it wasn't extravagant. No helicopter, no flash mob, no champagne-soaked hotel rooftop. Just him, me, a walk along the lake, and a simple gold ring. I said yes before he even finished asking, because to me, it wasn't about the spectacle. It was about us. Naturally, like every bride-to-be, I began dreaming of our wedding. Not a massive, princess-style ball, just something intimate, beautiful, and ours. I wanted to wear a dress that made me feel timeless, stand under twinkling lights, and marry the man who had stood by me through everything. And I thought I could afford that dream, because for as long as I could remember, my parents told me they had a wedding fund saved for me. It was almost a family tradition. When I was a teenager, my mom used to say, "Hannah, don't worry about your wedding one day. Your father and I have been saving since you were little. We want you to have something special." I'd overhear her bragging to friends about how she and Dad were responsible parents who set aside money for their children's big milestones. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? I didn't come from a wealthy family, but we weren't poor either. My parents were careful with money, at least that's what they claimed. So the idea of a savings fund waiting for me felt real. And in my head, I counted on it. Sure, I worked, and Mark worked, and we planned to contribute. But knowing there was something set aside gave me peace of mind. It gave me hope that my wedding wouldn't be a financial burden. So when Mark and I sat down to actually budget for the wedding, I was excited. We pulled out notebooks, made spreadsheets, laughed at how quickly things added up. Venues were expensive, catering was outrageous, but I wasn't too worried. "We've got my parents' fund," I told him confidently. "They've been saving for years." "We'll be okay, Mark," being Mark, raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure?" "Did they ever tell you how much?" "Not exactly," I admitted, brushing it off. "But they wouldn't lie about something like this. They said it was for me, and they've always mentioned it whenever weddings came up." I said it with such certainty. I can still hear my voice filled with that unshakable confidence. If only I knew. The first red flag came when I casually mentioned the wedding fund to my mom during coffee. "Hey, Mark and I are looking at venues this weekend," I told her. "We're thinking about booking one, but I want to make sure it fits with the budget, including the fund you and Dad saved." Her face flickered. Just for a second, but I saw it. A flash of discomfort. "Oh, honey," she said quickly, sipping her coffee. "Don't worry about that right now. Just focus on finding something you love. We'll figure the money part out later." It was an odd response. Normally, my mom loved being in control of details, especially financial ones, but I let it go. "Okay," I said slowly, though unease twisted in my gut. Weeks passed. We toured venues, I tried on dresses, and Mark and I got more and more excited. But every time I brought up the wedding fund, my parents brushed me off. "We'll talk about it soon. Don't stress yourself. You should focus on planning, not finances." At first, I thought they just didn't want me to worry, but something felt off. One night, I told Mark about it. They're avoiding the topic. every single time he frowned. Maybe it's not as much as they made it sound? Maybe they're embarrassed. The thought stung. Could it be possible? But even if it wasn't a lot, it was something, right? Surely they wouldn't lie about it altogether. Still, the unease grew. Then came the breaking moment. The conversation that would shatter everything I thought I knew. It was a Sunday afternoon, a casual family get-together at my parents' house. Grace was there, glowing as usual. She's 2 years younger than me, the kind of woman who seems to get everything handed to her. Where I was cautious, Grace was bold. Where I had to work for things, Grace always seemed to have things fall in her lap. And that day, she was showing off. "Can you believe it?" Grace squealed, waving her phone in my direction. "I just closed on my new condo downtown." My parents beamed at her like she'd hung the moon. "That's our girl," Dad said proudly, "always going after what she wants." I congratulated her politely, but something about the timing felt strange. Grace buying a luxury condo in the middle of my wedding planning? My parents' glowing pride? The pit in my stomach grew heavier. Then Grace laughed and said the words that froze me. Honestly, I couldn't have done it without Mom and Dad. They really came through for me with the down payment. I mean, who else can say their parents love them this much? Silence rang in my ears. I blinked. Wait. What? Grace looked at me like I was slow. They gave me the down payment money. You know, for the condo, it was huge. I couldn't believe it. She was glowing, smug. My parents exchanged nervous glances, and in that instant, the puzzle pieces snapped into place. My wedding fund. The money they'd promised me, saved for me, sworn was mine. It was gone. And it was sitting in the shiny condo my sister now bragged about. I felt like the floor had dropped beneath me. "Is this true?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "You used my wedding fund for Grace." The room went quiet. My dad sighed. My mom wrung her hands. Grace just smiled, oblivious or maybe uncaring. And in that suffocating silence, I realized the people I trusted most had robbed me. Not strangers, not some scammer, my own parents. That was the moment, the unforgettable moment, where everything shifted, and deep down, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. When Grace casually announced that my parents had used their savings to help her buy her condo, it was like a flash of lightning that illuminated every shadow of my childhood. The betrayal in that single moment wasn't just about the money. It was about a pattern, a truth I'd been too afraid to fully admit. My parents always favored Grace. This wasn't new. This wasn't sudden. This was the final straw in a lifetime of being treated like I was less. I was the firstborn, and for a while I believed that meant something. As a little girl, I remember being the one to proudly bring home finger paintings, spelling tests with gold stars, and choir recital programs. My parents would clap and smile, but their words were muted. "Good job, Hannah." "That's nice, honey." It wasn't dismissive exactly, but it wasn't full of pride either. When Grace came along 2 years later, everything shifted. Grace was loud, outgoing, charming. If I brought home a 95 on a math test, she'd come home singing a silly song, and suddenly the entire house would revolve around her. She had this magnetic energy, and I get it. People loved her. Teachers adored her. My parents adored her even more. The favoritism started small. At Christmas, my presents would always feel practical. Clothes I needed, a backpack, a sweater. Grace, on the other hand, would get glittering dolls, karaoke machines, and later, expensive makeup kits. On birthdays, mine were simple dinners at home with a cake from the grocery store. Grace got themed parties, balloons, rented halls, pony rides one year. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I was the mature one, the responsible one, the one who didn't need all the attention. But deep down, it hurt. The differences grew with age. When I applied to college, I worked part-time at a cafe to save money. My parents praised my independence, but offered little help beyond emotional support. 2 years later, when Grace wanted to study abroad for a semester in Paris, my parents emptied their savings to make it happen. "It's such an opportunity," they gushed. "We can't let her miss out." I was stunned. But when I asked for help with tuition, Mom waved it off. "You were always so responsible, Hannah. You managed fine on your own." That became the narrative. I was the strong one, the self-sufficient one, the one who didn't need them. Grace, meanwhile, was the golden child who deserved endless support because she was special. Mark once asked me, long before the engagement, "Do you ever feel like your parents play favorites?" I remember freezing. My instinct was to deny it, to protect them. No, they love us equally. They just see us differently. But saying it out loud, even in that weak, half-hearted way, made me feel sick because I knew. I always knew. Sitting in that living room, hearing Grace brag about her condo, everything crystallized. My parents hadn't just stolen my wedding fund. They'd stolen every moment in my life when I could have felt like I mattered as much as my sister, and I couldn't stop the flood of memories. There was the time I spent weeks preparing for my high school debate finals. I practiced in the mirror, researched endlessly, and when I won second place, I rushed home to tell my parents. Mom smiled politely, but then Grace twirled into the room in her new dress for prom, and suddenly the conversation shifted entirely. "That dress looks amazing on you, Grace. Let's take pictures." I stood there holding my silver medal, invisible. There was the Christmas when I was 19. I'd just finished my first semester at college with straight A's while juggling 2 jobs. My parents' gift to me? A vacuum cleaner for my dorm. Grace, meanwhile, got a MacBook. "Why does she get that?" I asked, unable to hide my frustration. "She needs it for school," Dad explained. "So do I protested. But they brushed me off. It sounds petty when listed out. A laptop, a party, a dress. But it wasn't about the things. It was about what they symbolized. Grace was always worth investing in. I was always expected to figure it out myself. Mark, bless him, tried to ground me when I spiraled that night after the condo reveal. "Hannah," he said gently, holding my hand, "I know this hurts. But maybe your parents thought Grace needed it more. Maybe they think you and I are stable enough to manage without their help." I shook my head. "That's the problem, Mark. That's always their excuse. I'm stable. I'm responsible. I'm fine. But doesn't that mean I deserve their support too? Just once? I've spent my whole life proving myself while Grace got everything handed to her." My voice cracked. This was supposed to be my turn. He pulled me into his arms, and for the first time, I let myself cry. Not just for the stolen money, but for every stolen moment before it. The betrayal cut deeper because of the lies. They could have told me. They could have been honest. "Look, Hannah, we had to dip into your fund to help Grace. We're sorry it still would have hurt, but at least it wouldn't have blindsided me." Instead, they let me plan, let me dream, let me believe in a wedding I could afford, while knowing full well the money was gone. They let me sit there making spreadsheets with Mark, calculating costs, all while smiling and nodding like supportive parents. That wasn't just favoritism. That was cruelty. The night after the reveal, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my chest heavy. My mind replayed their excuses, their proud smiles at Grace and my own voice. Breaking, accusing, betrayed. And in that sleepless silence, I asked myself the question I'd been avoiding for years. Why do I keep expecting them to change? Why do I keep hoping that one day they'll see me as equal? I didn't have an answer, but I knew one thing. This time, it wasn't something I could just swallow. This wasn't a forgotten medal or a lopsided Christmas. This was my future, my wedding, my dream. And they'd taken it. So I made myself a promise that night. No more excuses, no more pretending it didn't matter. If they weren't going to treat me as equal, then I needed to decide how much space they deserved in my life. And that decision, I knew, would change everything. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes from crying, but also with a clarity I hadn't felt before. For the first time in years, I wasn't going to just accept what my parents had done. I wasn't going to swallow my anger, bury the pain, and move on like I always did. This wasn't just about money. This was about respect. It was about finally standing up for the little girl who had been ignored, dismissed, and pushed aside her entire life. So I told Mark, I need to talk to them. Directly. No more pretending. We drove to my parents' house that evening. I still remember how ordinary it looked from the outside. Red brick, white shutters, the same garden gnomes Mom refused to throw out. But inside, I felt like I was walking into a courtroom, ready to present my case. Grace was there too, lounging on the couch like she didn't have a care in the world. She sipped her iced coffee and scrolled through her phone, barely glancing up when we walked in. Mom greeted us with a smile that felt rehearsed. Dad stood stiffly behind her, like he already knew this wasn't going to be pleasant. "Hannah," Mom said gently, "I know you're upset, but maybe we can talk this through calmly." "Calmly?" I snapped, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and heartbreak. "You took my wedding fund. You lied to me. And now you want me to be calm?" The room went silent. Grace finally looked up from her phone and rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on, Hannah. It's not that big of a deal. You'll figure something out. You always do. Besides, this was an investment. I needed that condo. I can't live in some crappy apartment forever." Her words hit me like a slap. An investment, Grace? It was my future, my wedding, something I've been planning and saving for since Mark proposed. "Do you even hear yourself?" She shrugged. "You'll be fine. You and Mark both work. You're stable. I'm not." I turned to my parents, my voice sharp now. "And you too just let this happen? You gave away money that was set aside for me. How could you possibly justify that?" Dad sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Hannah, you've always been the responsible one. You don't need as much help. Grace, well, she struggles. She needs a little extra support." I laughed bitterly. "That's your excuse? That because I've worked hard? Because I've been responsible? Because I don't screw up? You think I deserve less? How's that fair?" Mom's face tightened. "It's not about fairness. It's about practicality. Grace was in a position where we could make a real difference for her. You and Mark will be okay without it." "Practicality?" My voice cracked. "You stole from me and call it practical?" Mark, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. His calm voice cut through the tension. "With all due respect, this isn't just about practicality. You made a promise to Hannah. You set money aside for her wedding, and then you broke that promise without telling her. That's not practical. That's dishonest." Dad's jaw tightened, and for a moment I thought he might actually agree, but then he shook his head. "You're not married yet, Mark. You don't understand how hard it is to support 2 children. We did what we thought was best for the family." I nearly screamed. Best for the family? Or best for Grace? Because it feels like I've never actually been part of this family, not in the way Grace has. Mom's lips pressed into a thin line. That's unfair, Hannah. We've always loved you both. Loved us both? My laugh was bitter and sharp. Loved us equally? Really? Do you want me to start listing every time you favored Grace over me? The parties, the trips, the laptop, the study abroad, the constant excuses, and now my wedding fund? You've made it perfectly clear who matters more. Grace groaned, tossing her phone on the couch. Oh my God, you're so dramatic. You're jealous. Admit it. You've always been jealous of me. I turned on her, my voice shaking with fury. Jealous? Of what? Of constantly being handed everything? Of never learning how to stand on your own 2 feet? You think I want that? You think I want to be treated like I'm fragile? Like I can't survive without handouts? No, Grace, I'm not jealous. I'm exhausted. I'm tired of being invisible while you're worshipped for doing the bare minimum. The words hung in the air. For once, Grace didn't have a snappy comeback. She looked stunned, maybe even a little wounded. But I didn't care. This wasn't about her anymore. This was about me. I turned back to my parents, my chest heaving. You've always justified it. You've always said I didn't need your help. But here's the truth. You never wanted to give it to me. Because giving to Grace made you feel needed, and I made you uncomfortable. Because I didn't need rescuing. I just needed love. I just needed to matter. My voice broke, but I forced myself to finish, and clearly I never did. The silence that followed was suffocating. Mom finally whispered, "That's not true." But her voice was weak, unconvincing. Dad opened his mouth, then closed it again, as if he couldn't find the words. Grace shifted uncomfortably, biting her lip. For the first time in my life, I felt like they were the ones on the defensive, and for the first time, I wasn't backing down. Mark put his arm around me, grounding me. "Hannah," he said softly, "maybe we should go." But I shook my head. Not yet. I took a deep breath and looked my parents in the eye. I don't know what this means for us, but I do know one thing. This changes everything. I can't keep pretending we're a happy family when you keep choosing Grace over me. I deserve better than this, and I won't let you take anything else from me again. With that, I turned and walked out the door. My parents didn't stop me. Grace didn't call after me, and for the first time in years, I felt free. That night, lying in bed beside Mark, I cried again. But these tears were different. They weren't just about loss. They were about release. I had finally said the words I'd been carrying for decades, and though the road ahead was uncertain, I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let their favoritism define me anymore. I was done being second place. Walking out of my parents' house that evening felt like stepping into a different world. The night air was cold, sharp against my skin, but for the first time in years, my chest felt lighter. I had spoken my truth. But the moment the adrenaline faded, reality sank in. I no longer had a wedding fund, and I no longer had the illusion of a family that loved me equally. Mark drove us home in silence, his hand gripping mine the whole way. The warmth of his touch steadied me, but I could feel his worry radiating. Finally, he said, "Hannah, are you okay?" The question was so simple, but it nearly broke me. Because no, I wasn't okay. I'd just confronted decades of favoritism, had my suspicions confirmed, and walked away from my parents without knowing if there would ever be reconciliation. But I couldn't collapse. Not yet. So I whispered, "I will be." The days after that confrontation were strange. Grace texted me once, "You were way out of line." But whatever. Enjoy being the victim. I stared at the message, my fingers itching to respond, to unleash everything I wanted to say. But then I thought of her smug face, her dismissive tone, her endless entitlement. And I deleted the draft. Silence would hurt her more than words ever could. Mom called a few times too, but never left a voicemail. I knew she was hoping I'd eventually calm down and come crawling back like I always did. But I wasn't that Hannah anymore. Meanwhile, Mark and I had to face a brutal truth. Without the wedding fund, our carefully budgeted dream wedding was gone. One evening, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at our spreadsheet, the one I had pored over for months. The venue, the caterer, the photographer, all of it hinged on that money. Mark sat across from me, his eyes soft. "We'll figure it out, Hannah. We can downsize. Or wait a little longer." Tears burned my eyes. But I don't want to downsize. This was supposed to be our day, the one day that's about us, not them. And they took it from me. Mark reached for my hand. "No, they didn't take it. We'll take it back. Maybe not the exact way we planned, but we'll make it ours. And it'll be even better because it'll be us. Just us." His faith in us was unshakable. And in that moment, I realized something important. My parents could take their money, but they couldn't take what Mark and I had built together. Still, the bitterness lingered. Every time I thought about walking down the aisle, I imagined my parents sitting there, smiling proudly, as if they hadn't just betrayed me. The thought made me sick. One night I asked Mark, "Do you think I should even invite them?" He hesitated, clearly weighing his words. "Hannah, that's your decision, but whatever you choose, I'll support you." I bit my lip. If I invite them, it feels like I'm saying what they did was okay. But if I don't, it feels like I'm admitting defeat, like they've pushed me out of my own family. Mark squeezed my hand. Or maybe it's not about them at all. Maybe it's about choosing what makes you feel at peace on your wedding day. If their presence ruins that, then maybe they don't deserve a seat. His words settled into me like a seed, one that would take time to grow. Work became my distraction. I threw myself into projects, stayed late at the office, anything to avoid spiraling into resentment. But even there, the favoritism haunted me. One afternoon, I watched a coworker excitedly FaceTime her parents to show off her engagement ring. Her mom screamed with joy through the phone. Her dad popped a champagne bottle in the background. I smiled politely, but inside, my chest ached. I couldn't remember the last time my parents celebrated me like that. And now I wasn't even sure if they'd show up to my wedding at all. A week after the confrontation, Mark surprised me with takeout and candles in our living room. "What's this?" I asked, blinking at the dim lights and the soft music. He smiled. "It's a wedding planning reset. Just you and me. No parents, no drama, just us figuring out what we want." My heart swelled. For the first time in days, I laughed. Really laughed. We spent the evening brainstorming ideas. A smaller venue, maybe a garden ceremony, or even eloping somewhere beautiful. Each suggestion felt like reclaiming a piece of joy that had been stolen from me. And slowly, the bitterness began to loosen its grip. But then came the guilt. Late at night, lying in bed, I'd think about my parents, about Dad's tired eyes, Mom's shaky voice when she insisted they loved me. I wondered if I was being too harsh, if maybe I'd regret cutting them out. But then I'd remember the look on Grace's face when she called me dramatic, the smug tone when she said I'd figure it out. And I knew I wasn't the problem. They were. One evening, Mark found me staring at an old family photo. We were at the beach, Grace in the center with her bright smile, my parents' arms wrapped around her. I was off to the side, holding the beach ball, smiling too, but barely noticed. Mark studied the picture, then whispered, "You've been carrying this weight your whole life, haven't you?" Tears slipped down my cheeks. "Yeah, and I don't know how to put it down." He pulled me into his arms. Then let me help you. Let me carry it with you. And for the first time, I realized maybe I didn't need my parents' validation anymore. Maybe what I needed had been beside me all along. The next morning, I opened my laptop and started writing. Not to my parents, not to Grace, to myself. I wrote about every memory of favoritism, every hurt, every betrayal. I poured it all out, pages and pages, until my hands cramped. And then I ended it with one sentence. I deserve better, and I'm not going to settle for less anymore. It wasn't closure, not yet, but it was a beginning. Mark and I officially decided to scrap the big wedding. Instead, we planned a smaller, intimate ceremony with only the people who had truly supported us. Friends, chosen family, his parents, my closest cousin who'd always been my rock. No Grace, no mom, no dad. The decision was painful, but also liberating. For once, I was choosing myself. The morning of my wedding dawned warm and golden, sunlight spilling through the windows like a blessing. It wasn't the extravagant ballroom event I'd once envisioned. There were no towering centerpieces, no 100-person guest list, no sprawling venue funded by my parents' savings. Instead, we were standing in the backyard of Mark's parents' home, which they'd lovingly transformed into a garden paradise. Fairy lights draped between trees, roses climbed trellises, white chairs lined the lawn. It was smaller, yes, but it was beautiful, and it was ours. I slipped into my dress in the upstairs bedroom. It wasn't the designer gown I'd originally pinned on my vision board. It was simpler, elegant, bought on sale after weeks of searching. But when I looked in the mirror, I saw a bride who wasn't defined by what she lacked, but by what she'd fought to claim. My cousin Lila, my unofficial maid of honor, tightened the last button and grinned. "You look stunning, Hannah." And you know what? This wedding already feels more real, more you, than any big ballroom thing ever could. I smiled through tears. I wish it didn't come to this. That I didn't have to choose between my dream and my family. Lila's eyes softened. "Sweetheart, you didn't choose." "They did. And now you get to choose yourself." Her words settled into me like armor. But just when I thought the day would go smoothly, a curveball arrived. As guests began to trickle in, Mark's younger brother came upstairs looking awkward. Hannah? "There's someone at the gate." My stomach tightened. "Who?" He hesitated. "Your parents." And Grace. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. They weren't on the guest list. They weren't supposed to be here. I rushed to the window, and sure enough, there they were. Mom in a pastel dress, Dad in his suit, Grace in a flashy gown that screamed center of attention. They hadn't called ahead. They hadn't asked. They'd just shown up. Mark found me pacing the bedroom. "What do you want to do?" he asked gently. Anger and panic warred inside me. Part of me wanted to scream at them to leave. Another part, the old Hannah, the one desperate for approval, wanted to let them in, to avoid the scene, to avoid being the daughter who shut out her family. But then I thought about all the nights I cried as a child, invisible in my own home, about the vacuum cleaner gift while Grace got a laptop, about the wedding fund stolen for a condo, and suddenly, clarity washed over me. This day wasn't theirs. It was mine. I walked to the gate myself, dress trailing behind me. When they saw me, Mom's face lit up. "Oh, Hannah, you look beautiful," she gushed, tears already in her eyes. Dad smiled stiffly. "We wouldn't miss our daughter's wedding." Grace smirked. "A backyard wedding, huh?" Cute. Her voice dripped with condescension, like she was already ready to tell her friends about how small my wedding had been compared to what she imagined for herself. And in that moment, the old ache inside me hardened into steel. I took a deep breath. "You're not welcome here." The words shocked even me. Mom's face fell. "What?" "Hannah, we're your parents. We came to support you." "To support me?" My voice shook with fury. "You stole from me. You lied to me. You made it clear Grace mattered more. And now you think you can just waltz in here and pretend none of it happened." Dad frowned. "That's unfair." "We've always done our best." "No," I cut him off, my voice rising. "You've always done your best for Grace. Never for me. And I won't let you ruin today. Not this time. Today is about Mark and me, not about cleaning up your lies or pretending we're one big, happy family." Grace scoffed. "You're so dramatic." "It's a wedding, Hannah. Let it go already." I stared at her, shaking my head. "You don't get it. You've never gotten it. You've always taken Grace, because they let you. But you won't take this." "Not today." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "Hannah, please, we love you." Something inside me broke at those words, not because I believed them, but because I finally knew I didn't need them. I straightened my shoulders. "If you loved me, you would have treated me like I mattered. You would have respected me enough to keep your promises. But you didn't. And now you don't get to stand here and act like you did." I turned to the security guard Mark's parents had hired. "Please escort them off the property." Mom gasped. "Hannah!" Dad's face flushed red. Grace muttered under her breath about how pathetic I was. But they left. For once in my life, I had the final word. When I walked back inside, Mark was waiting, worry etched on his face. I told him what happened, and he pulled me close. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. "You protected your peace. And now, this day, it's truly yours." The ceremony began at sunset. I walked down the aisle to soft music, fairy lights twinkling overhead. Mark's eyes shone with tears as he saw me, and for the first time that day, I let myself smile without restraint. We exchanged vows we wrote ourselves, promises not about wealth or status or approval, but about choosing each other every day, no matter what. When Mark slipped the ring onto my finger, I realized something. I had spent my whole life begging my parents to see me, to value me, to choose me. But standing there, holding Mark's hand, I finally understood. I didn't need their validation anymore. I was chosen, I was loved, and it was enough. The reception was small but joyful. Laughter filled the night as friends toasted us. Music floated through the air, and for the first time, I felt completely free of the shadow my family had cast over me. Later, when Mark and I danced under the string lights, he whispered in my ear, "This is perfect." And it was. Not because it was grand, not because it was flawless, but because it was mine. In the weeks that followed, Mom tried to call again. Dad sent a stiff email about being hurt by how I treated them. Grace posted Instagram stories mocking my cheap wedding. But none of it mattered anymore. For once, I wasn't crushed by their disapproval, because I had finally stopped trying to win a game that was rigged from the start. And I had built something stronger, something real. A marriage built on love, respect, and equality. Something my parents and Grace could never take from me.